Of all the different characters that have ever appeared in video games, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles have probably had the largest impact of any characters that didn't actually originate in gaming. Well, positive impact at least. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, when TMNT fever was at its peak, arcades flourished and Nintendo ruled the world. The Ninja Turtles pretty much set the standard for the beat-em-up genre, with banger after banger. With Turtles in Time being regarded as one of, if not the best, beat-em-up ever made. But, as everyone eventually finds out, nothing and no one stays on top forever. And seemingly, simultaneously, the popularity of both the Turtles and the beat-em-up genre as a whole would begin to wane, just as the polygonal era of gaming would rise. But what's really shocking, despite still having a strong fan base, the Heroes in Half Shell would actually sit out these early days, not appearing on any of the first 3D consoles. Wait. You're trying to tell me that there is an IP, a popular, money-making IP, that wasn't being milked to death? Can they do that? Of course, that wouldn't last forever either, as the Green Machines would see their first big animated reboot in 2003, which obviously would need its own video game, simply named Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yeah, cause you know, that bodes well. Also released in 2003 for the Gamecube and PS2, as well as the Game Boy Advance, though that's a completely different game, and I'll cover that another time. TMNT is a 3D beat-em-up. A genre one would think, you know, given their history, that the Turtles would slip into like a well-worn shell. Especially since, you know, this was Konami we're talking about. The same people that brought us all the classics. Oh man, do you guys actually remember back when Konami actually made games? Instead of, you know, just re-releasing collections of games? You know, I don't even know why I'm hating on this. I love these things. But sadly, no. TMNT, unfortunately, is one of those franchises that really hit the ground running and immediately face-planted. In their initial jump to 3D. And while some of the problems are understandable growing pains, other decisions, being generous there, like confusing storytelling, limited co-op, and forced replay, really do just beg the question, what the shell were they thinking? And trust me, I get it. I grew up liking this game too, so at the very least I can tell you, it's not all doom and gloom, as things do start out pretty strong, opening up with that shellacious 2003 theme song. But unlike the 8, 16, and 32-bit days, where they more or less remade the opening tune and visuals to fit the console, this era is all about embracing video. Oh god, no, not that. Which, as we'll soon find out, is going to be beat to death in this game. In what has to be some of the weirdest and most confusing, but also one of the coolest ways possible? Yeah, really. Though that's a major spoiler that we're gonna save for the end. So let's hold off for now. And instead, let's dive into the game's first big mistake, which actually hits before you even get to control a turtle. Assuming, of course, you're playing with a friend. I am indeed talking about the poorly implemented co-op, which actually takes on two forms here. First off, the minor one. Why isn't this game 4-playered? Like, with the older games, we all understood that there were hardware limitations that came from porting from the arcade to console, not to mention the controller ports. But here, 3 out of the 4 major consoles were primed for it.
Turtles count it off! 1, 2, 3, oh, 2.
But regardless, whichever version you play, TMNT is only 2-playered. A problem that the sequels would actually rectify, but still, poor choice. But again, a minor one. The real problem with the co-op is just how the players are handled. Basically, the campaign's progress is locked to whoever player 1 is controlling, meaning that they can't switch turtles at any time unless they want to replay the stages. So you pretty much need to beat the game with whichever turtle you selected, where player 2 doesn't have any such limitation. though what they do get is way odder. Player 2 unfortunately gets the Tails treatment, being relegated to an assist character, but with none of the perks. No invincibility or anything like that, at least initially. You're just saddled with limitations, though you probably won't notice right away as both players play the same. But trust me, they crop up as the game progresses. So let's go ahead and watch it fall apart as we go. Ninja jumping straight into the main campaign, you'll notice it's split up into multiple chapters, with each opening up with segments from the show, and the first one being especially long. Though I guess it saves on the animation budget. And considering that this is what we got for some of the in-game cutscenes, yeah, I kinda see why they went with clips from the show. Though, I personally think that these are hilarious. And, to be fair, TMNT went for that Cel Shaded look that honestly looked pretty good for the time, particularly in the combat, and has aged way better than a lot of the games of that era that went for the more full-on realistic look, making it way easier to go back to today. The first stage actually starts out with the turtles under assault from the Mousers in the sewer, and I gotta say, it is not a strong start, as the ceiling immediately starts falling on your head only 5 seconds after you gain control. You haven't even had enough time to test out all the buttons yet before taking a cheap shot. Ooh, another unexpected TMNT parallel there. And yes, I see that there's dust falling from the ceiling, that is the indicator. But I mean, come on, we haven't even gotten our bearings yet, and the first thing you do is drop an environmental hazard? Come on. But following that is our first actual baddies, a swarm of Mousers, who make great practice for figuring out what we can actually do. Combat itself is very simple. The turtles have a dash, a basic attack combo, a running attack, a second attack combo that's not any better than the first, a limited set of throwable shuriken, and if you're playing co-op, a throwing move that you'll probably never use, because it's super awkward to get going, requiring both players to kind of have to like pose into each other's character frame, only to do this. Don't be fooled, it looks cooler than it actually is. Now, if those moves seem limited to you, don't worry. That's not quite all of them, but, well, it's only part of the odd choices the game makes as we go, with the next big one being a curve in the story. Assuming, of course, you chose the right character. So I'm just gonna go right ahead and rip that band-aid off right here. The way TMNT tells its story in this game is just atrocious. Ugh. And before any shellheads go jumping into the comments and turn me into turtle soup, I don't mean that the 03 story is bad. On the contrary, it is amazing. It's just how this game goes about telling that story that is just the absolute worst. Especially for newcomers, as it is completely butchered. So here's what I mean. If player 1 chooses Leo, Donnie, or Mikey, then they all get the same opening setup. The Mousers cave in the lair, the turtles go topside, they end up fighting against a gang known as the Purple Dragons, which results in them saving April O'Neil from Baxter Stockman.
But first, we've got to save April!
We save April at least once a day.
However, if player 1 chooses Raph, well, you still get the same scenario, except now you get an additional cutscene introducing Casey Jones, with him actually explaining who the Purple Dragons are, as well as an exclusive boss fight against him, all of which you completely miss out on playing as the other turtles. Though the story still goes on for the others as if they had had that cutscene and boss battle. Now, imagine loving the classic games and jumping into this one without actually having seen the show first. You'd have no idea who these characters are who were just there. Especially the ones without 87 counterparts. It's just confusing. And believe it or not, the game actually forces you to play through it 4 times. Once as every turtle controlled by player 1, just to get the whole picture. Which, hey, may sound cool at first, like that's replayability, right? And technically, sure. But 90% of the story and stages are exactly the same for each playthrough. with only minor changes here and there, like each turtle getting one exclusive boss fight, as well as a few smaller things like bosses appearing in different parts of the same level, for whatever reason. Oh, and these playthroughs can take hours, by the way. We're talking like 3 to 6 each. Anyway, once you've gotten past Area 1, the status quo is immediately broken up by the appearance of a training stage, and trust me, this one really matters. But don't let the name fool you. The game never at any point actually trains you. Like, say, teaching that different button combos can result in different attacks, such as a minor stun or a broader swing. Oh no, that'd be too useful a training. Plus, even when I did figure that out and told my buddy, he never stopped spamming the basic combo, like the entire game, so it really doesn't matter. Though, it would have been nice if the game had mentioned that the uppercut can hit barrels into the air, and is the only way to attack down enemies. Yeah, because that makes sense. Oh, no, wait. We can also hit them with the jump attack. Good, that makes way more sense. Completing the first training stage actually unlocks the jump attack, but only for player 1. Player 2 gets to go the entire game without one. What's worse is that there are 2 other training stages that just increase the power of player 1, but not player 2. So player 2 essentially gets weaker and weaker as the game progresses. Unless, of course, it's your second playthrough. At which point, player 2 can then use the fully powered up turtle from player 1's previous playthrough, essentially getting to be stronger all the way up until the final stage, when both players would finally be equal again. But then that also means that player 2 can't swap turtles on the fly to better adapt to different opponents. Unless, of course, it's like playthrough 4 or something. That, or you just played each stage 4 times in a row as each turtle and just kept swapping back and forth. But who wants to do that? By stage 2, the cracks in the shell are already starting to show, with the glaring hole coming from the show footage. With the big problem here being that instead of creating its own story like the 2D games did and have everything just revolve around that, the game instead just uses segments from the show. So stage 2 in particular, where this random thief and little robot are on the loose, really does have nothing to do with the overarching story. Not helped by the fact that the combat really does start to drag the further you get into the game. Zones that can be completed in, say, 4 to 5 minutes honestly feel like 10 to 15. The enemies, while varied, aren't very fun to fight against. They just appear in mobs, you take them down basically the same way every time, then rinse and repeat. Me and my buddy started making jokes towards the end of the game, like, oh look, another pair of camo soldiers. Oh look, another pair of camo soldiers. Oh look, another pair of camo soldiers. Oh look, you get the idea.
No sweat.
Gosh, I do hope there's more of them.
I think the major flaw is that the AI is painfully overly basic, with enemies usually having just 2 attacks that are only really threatening due to the number advantage, or just lack of ways to take them down fast enough. Especially when you're flying solo. Plus, they just have way too much health, which is why I really started to pick up on these flaws. And considering you need to beat the game 4 times just to get the true ending, you probably will too. But it is the boss fights where the combat goes from dull to just frustrating, adapting all of the worst elements of boss fights from the arcade games, ironically. With most attacks or combos immediately causing bosses to trigger a punishment response, forcing you to do a lot of hit and run style tactics if you want to even stand a chance. It is hard to single out any specific one, because honestly, they all just suck. But I'd say that fighting against the elemental ninjas, especially flying solo, is easily the worst, as they actively just jump away from you spamming projectiles the entire time. And when you do manage to catch them and hit them with a whole combo or a single jump attack, they go into an invincibility state and use AoE moves. It's not fun. And that's of course assuming you can hit them at all, as your greatest foe goes unseen the entire time, hidden in the shadows, constantly tripping you up, constantly in your way, watching you. The camera. The camera in this game sucks, keeping enemies off frame as they randomly cheap shot you. And while we're on the subject of frustration, let's talk sound. And by sound, I mean the voiceovers, because the music is awesome. It's basically playing remixes of the theme song and other stage appropriate stuff. Nothing particularly memorable, but they work. Assuming, of course, you can actually hear them over the one-liners. And look, I know this is TMNT. The turtles banter as they fight. Trust me, I'd have it no other way. But it really grates here. And I think the worst of it is during the training, when it doesn't even make sense.
Gotta split. I just hope Master Splinter doesn't do that.
But what really gets to me is the fact that the voiceovers, including during the 3D segments, are the show's voice actors, meaning they must have had them on hand. So instead of just using clips from the show, they could have just made their own voiced cutscenes for a more coherent story. But what they actually ended up doing is just odd. As you reach the end of your 4th playthrough, you'll notice that certain 3D clips have voiceovers from the show and vice versa, only slightly altered. It's like, why take the time to do this? Especially since some 3D scenes are clearly original. Not that they make any sense, but they're original. Like, when the turtles confront Shredder at the end of the game, they talk to him as if they had fought him before, and lost. Though we, the players, never got to actually see any of that in any of our playthroughs. And in the 4th and final run, not counting the Splinter run you unlock if you really want to suffer through a 5th playthrough, the turtles unlock a new power, seemingly focused around a change in the overall story. Gameplay-wise, this is just a super broken attack that can be spammed 3 times per stage, which honestly helps you plow through the final area on your final run. I wish we had gotten this way earlier in the game, would have helped get through these playthroughs way faster, but hey, better late than never, I guess. Though, how this attack works story-wise...
Okay, now it's time for that major spoiler I promised at the beginning. And honestly, it is super cool. But it also doesn't make any sense if you know anything about 2003 Turtles. But either way, if you don't want to get spoiled, jump to here in the video. I've also got timestamps down below, and I'll see you soon.
So, long story short, this game has original 03 footage. And I mean animated 03 footage of a fight that never actually happened in the show. And funny enough, the way the Turtles' new power works absolutely wouldn't work on this Shredder, knowing what we know about him in later seasons. But obviously, that wasn't conveyed to the team at Konami. But hey, it's still cool. Though it does once again bring up the question as to why the game's story is told the way it is, when they could have had custom footage made. That, or just, done it in 3D. Who knows, maybe this was just footage on the cutting room floor and was available. Honestly, the truth is, we'll probably never find out. But in the end, what I do know is that TMNT on the Gamecube and PS2 is an absolute mess of a game. The way it treats player 2 is just stupid. But I couldn't recommend playing this without a buddy by your side, because the combat is slow and cheap and really only gets worse when fighting alone. And the story is just nonsensical. But what really hurts the most here is that there were clear signs of greatness baked in that shows what could have been. At the end of each Turtles story, you get a final 3D cutscene. No words are spoken, but each is unique and truly captures what makes the Turtles great. If they had done more of this the entire game, really utilize the voice actors to tell a unique story, and just cut the fat. These pointless replays, and honestly just focused on tighter combats, TMNT could have been, and realistically should have been, an absolute gem of the era. But what we ended up getting was just the mediocrity expected of license-based games, and not worthy of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.